perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
So on the topic of communication and your interest in communication and your involvement in, your podcast and teaching kids about science. So what sparked this communication then in science communication in particular?
Yeah, I guess the origin story to that, I believe it came from a negative experience I had. I remember a mentor of mine, this was during a group meeting we had where I guess all of us were trying to present what the work we were doing over the last few weeks, let's say. And this happens a lot in science. You're a part of this research team, and then you get together, say once a week, once a month, and talk to your team about the work that you're doing, problems you're having, and then you all kind of discuss it. So there was one particular meeting where a mentor of mine implied that I was terrible at communicating the work I was doing to the team members. And I remember after that meeting, I had two options. One, I could quit. I could quit the project. Or two, I could just really work on how I speak or just how I describe science in general. I wasn't always a good speaker. I was very not confident in stuff that I would say. From that meeting, I would sort of engage and try to attend talks that people in my community would be giving, talks about their research. I would watch a lot of YouTube videos. I would read a lot of books about science and how they would write about science, communicating the science, how they would write that. Because mainly in science, for people that may not know, you're sort of just enthralled with scientific research papers. And that in itself is very, sometimes good writing. It's very specific, but it doesn't really translate to speaking in front of an audience, for example, or getting your message across to different audiences. From then, I would just engage with anything that would help me in communicating science. And that would involve, joining volunteer groups as well, doing different initiatives in my university community. And that sort of grew my interest in, okay, this is actually fun. I like developing communication skills in science. And then I would just try to do as many projects as I could.
So it's interesting that you said you weren't really into communication. You didn't think you were a good communicator, and you've worked at that. For any people in, let's say, academia who want to communicate their science, but feel like they're not great communicators or don't know how, have you got maybe like a few top tips that can help them become better communicators?
Yeah. So honestly, how I did it was just to accept failure and try to get yourself the experience of communicating, whether that be in front of a lab research group. You can do, for specifically people in academia, you could do journal clubs where you read papers in a group, or you talk about a paper within a group. Maybe one person is in charge of that paper, and you kind of discuss the science behind that paper and have a discussion through that. So that's something. Maybe just in terms of general things, something you could do is to do improv. Most of the time, I think that when you talk about science, you're kind of trying to remember really complex things in your head. So you're not really in the moment per se. A way to practice that is to do improv, and every science communication workshop that I've attended many of these because I thought I was a really bad communicator. And I'm still developing those skills. Anyway, any of these workshops that I attended would always have some sort of improv aspect to it. Most people there are PhD students, so the instructor would say, okay, pick an object in your room, grab that object, and pretend you need this object for your research. Talk about it. You do a 1-minute presentation on it, for example. So just thinking on your feet allows you to not be solely focused on memorizing, these really complex scientific things that you want to talk about in your talk, which is important to do, but getting out of your head, just being more engaging with the audience, with the slides that you have, and not just reading off the slides or just memorizing something is really important to do. Yeah, in terms of a technique that can maybe help you in communicating science well, doing some sort of improv exercises really helped me.